All right, we do still have some people joining, but it's slowing down a bit. So, as I said, my name is Samuel Spade. I'm a staff attorney here at Homeline, and this is our webinar on the renter's credit in 2026. We're joined by Jessica Del Cid, the grants coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and Michelle Jensen, the family services and tax program manager at United Community Action Partnership. And I'm going to get started here. We do just have a couple housekeeping topics that I want to cover. First, what is Homeline? Everyone probably knows this, but just in case you don't, Homeline is a statewide nonprofit organization. We do a number of different things. We provide free legal, educational, and advocacy services to Minnesota renters through our free and confidential legal hotline. We've advised over 350,000 renters since 1992. We are statewide. We operate in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. You can also email us online, and these are our phone numbers. We do also have 2 upcoming webinars. We have an upcoming webinar on February 18th regarding privacy in landlord-tenant situations, especially regarding landlord's entry into a tenant's unit, but really any privacy questions that you might have in a landlord-tenant situation. This is going to be a webinar for that. And then on March 18th, we're going to have a presentation from Safe at Home, what Safe at Home is if you don't know it, and how it's used and how you can use it in the landlord-tenant situation. And last few things, we are recording this. You should have received a notification when you logged in. The recording will be available on Homeline's website in just a few days. And please ask questions through the Q&A function located at the bottom of the Zoom window. You can write in chat, and I will see it most likely, but I might miss it. So it's a lot easier for us if you ask the questions through the question and answer feature. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk about the renter's credit updates.
Thanks, Samuel. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Next. Information in this presentation is based on the laws in effect when it was written, so it does not supersede or alter any provision of Minnesota laws, administrative rules, court cases, or revenue notices, and it does not provide tax advice. On our agenda today, we're going to discuss the renter's credit and then updates for property owners and managing agents. So my name is Jessica Dilsid. I am the outreach coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and I educate taxpayers on Minnesota tax laws. So I'm here with you today to share some information about the basic requirements of the Minnesota Renters Credits for both renters and property owners and managing agents, and then how to complete a certificate of rent paid. I'm also going to share with you some resources that are available to you. If you are a renter, you may be eligible to claim the renter's credit as part of your Minnesota individual income tax return on the Form M1. The renter's credit is a refundable credit on an income tax return, so it's going to decrease how much you owe or it can increase your refund. Some of the qualifications. To qualify, all of these must be true. So you must have a valid Social Security number or an individual taxpayer identification number, an ITIN. You must be a full year or part year Minnesota resident. You must have lived in and paid rent on a Minnesota building where the owner was assessed property tax or made payments in lieu of property tax. Your household income is below $75,390, and you cannot be claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return. Household income. So household income for the renter's credit is your adjusted gross income minus subtractions for anyone over 65 or disabled, and also dependents who are claimed on the Schedule M1 DQC. So if you're a part-year resident, household income only includes adjusted gross income received while a Minnesota resident. If you are married filing separately, your household income includes your spouse's income while you were married and living together. And then the amount that you're eligible for, it's going to be dependent on your specific filing situation, but the maximum credit is $2,640. Next.
And Jessica, could I ask just a quick question there? Because I think I understand what you mean when you say dependent upon your income, but the amount of the credit you received, that's effectively is scaled, right? The more you make, the less you receive back.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on your income and the amount of rent that you're paying. But yes, it is a sliding scale. So the less you make, the more you might receive as a refund.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Let's see here. So, some important reminders. Renters will claim the renter's credit on their individual income tax return, which is the Form M1. It's no longer on the Form M1 PR. Renters will use their certificate of rent paid, their CRP, to file for the renter's credit. Your CRP should have an electronic certificate number, an ECN. If it does not, contact your property owner or managing agent and ask them for a corrected CRP, which would include that ECN. If you don't get one, go ahead and file your return and claim the renter's credit with the CRP that they provided you. Just know that we may contact you for some additional information. There's no separate refund. So you're no longer going to receive a renter's refund in August or September. It's now going to be included with your income tax refund or amount due. And then if you're amending a renter's property tax refund return, the Form M1 PR for 2023 or before, you're still going to use the previous forms and you will receive a separate refund in that instance. Next. After significant changes to the renter's credit last year, we fine-tuned some items on the Schedule M1 rent for this year to make processing of this credit easier. So what we did is we added a checkbox if the rent exceeds the taxpayer's income, and we made room to add non-taxable income types and amounts. And that is used for processing returns only. It does not affect the amount of the renter's credit. And then we also expanded the instructions for residents of care facilities. Property owners must include, again, an ECN and an electronic control number on each of those CRPs for the return to be e-filed. Next. To claim the credit, you must file an income tax return and provide your certificate of rent paid information. The CRP is going to show how much rent you paid during the previous year. So your property owner or managing agent must give you a completed CRP by January 31st, which is next Saturday. When filing your income tax return, renters are going to use Schedule M1 rent, the renter's credit, along with the Schedule M1 REF, refundable credits, to receive the renter's credit. Renters should include their certificate of rent paid document that they received from their property owner or managing agent when they're filing this return. There's a couple ways that you can file. So you can file electronically. That means you're going to use tax software to file your Minnesota income tax return online. Or you can file by mail. So you'll just go online, download and complete the Form M1, the Schedule M1 REF, and the Schedule M1 rent. And then you'll mail us your completed return and you'll include copies of your CRPs from the past year. If you don't do that, your refund may be delayed or even denied. Next. What if my CRP is incorrect or I did not receive one? You can ask your property owner or your managing agent to correct or provide you your CRP. If your property owner or managing agent does not correct or provide it by February 1st, then you can contact us and request a rent paid affidavit, an RPA. You must include a copy of the RPA and proof of rent paid with your return, even if you end up receiving a CRP from your landlord later on. And if you don't submit that documentation, we would deny your refund. It could be delayed as well. So with an RPA, you do need to include proof of rent paid.
All right, let me just stop and ask a couple questions here.
Yes.
So I'm going to go back one slide on this slide right here for the tenant. The document that the only document that the tenant receives from the landlord is the certificate of rent paid. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and then the rest of these documents, these are the tax documents that the tenant is going to prepare as they are filing their taxes.
Correct. Yep. Those three are filed with their income tax return.
Okay. And then, and I know that this has now been this way for a year, but just very briefly, because the change was only 2 years ago, could you say how this is different from what it was like in like 2024, 2023?
Yeah, absolutely. So previously, instead of filing all these schedules with the Form M1, you would file the Form M1PR, which was for the renter's credit or a homeowner refund. So now it's just been combined on the income tax return. So there's no separate refund later on in the year. It's basically all done at the same time. File it before April 15th with your income tax return.
And you've obviously said that now a couple times, but I think from our perspective, the thing that I'll add is that is one of the biggest changes for us that we see. We get questions because tenants either forget or don't know that the new deadline is the tax deadline. And so like that's, we're getting calls in May, June, July about this sometimes, and we really want to get the information and the word out there that when you're filing, it is now with your taxes. And again, this is the second year. Hopefully, it will not be as big of a trip up for tenants and landlords, but tenants especially. Um, but there are some people who maybe didn't file one last year, or for one reason or another, and could this year, didn't know about the change.
Yep, that's correct.
All right. And then I'm sorry, you might cover this, but how far back can you file, especially with this change? Can you file still for 2023 or 2022?
Yeah, so good question. Typically, you have 3.5 years to file after the due date. So, depending which form you're filing, if you're filing the old M1 PR for a previous year, um, let's see, let me think. So, right now, we'd be filing a 2025 return, and this change took place last year for the 2024 return. Kind of try and think back.
Yeah.
So the 24 return you could file in 25, so that had to be done by August. So if you're filing on an M1 PR, you can't go backwards. The time limit is over unless you're filing an amended return. But for this, now that it's on the income tax return, you could basically go back to last year
Okay.
only. So the 2024 one.
2024 right now is what it would be limited to.
Yeah,
And I might have some more questions. We might have some more questions come in about that as we go. But I think that's all of my questions for now. Thank you very much.
absolutely.
Sorry,
Great
this
questions.
is the slides we're on now, I think.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
All right. So free tax preparation. You may qualify for free tax return preparation through Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, the VITA program, or through AERP Tax Aid. These programs help prepare federal and state income tax and property tax refund returns. So you can generally get help at a VITA site if any of these apply. So if you are age 60 or older, or you're a person with a disability, or you speak limited or no English, or your annual income is $68,675. And then we have the AARP tax aid sites, which do not have any income or age restrictions, but they focus mainly on senior citizen taxes. All sites, they only prepare basic returns. So if there's anything that's, a little more complicated, you might have to consult a professional tax preparer. Sites are generally open February 1st through April 15th. And then you can also qualify to file your own income tax return electronically at no cost. For details on that, you can search free electronic filing on on our website. Next. All right, so now we're going to talk about the responsibilities of property owners and managing agents. Next. So, a managing agent is acting on behalf of the property owner. If you own or manage a rental property and you rent living space to someone, you must provide them a CRP to each renter if any of these apply. So number one, property tax was payable on property in 2025, or if the property is tax exempt, but you made payments in lieu of property taxes. You must create and submit all Minnesota CRPs using e-services, and you must give each renter a CRP. You can give it to them either as an electronic copy or a hard paper copy, but those are due to your renters by January 31st, which again is next Saturday. For more information, you can go onto our website and search Create a Certificate of Rent Paid. Or you can search Certificate of Rent Paid instructions. All right, who gets a CRP? You must provide a separate CRP to each adult renter who lived in the rental unit in 2025. If one or more adult renters live in the same unit for the entire year, then you're going to show that each person paid an equal amount of rent. You must issue a CRP even if their name was not on the lease, but you should only have one name on each CRP. If you have a married couple, each of them is going to receive their own CRP showing that they each paid an equal portion of rent. Next. All right, important dates and penalties. So you must issue CRPs no later than January 31st. Again, that's next Saturday. For any rent paid in 2025. Again, you can give CRPs to the renters either as an electronic copy, so you can email it to them, or you can provide a hard paper copy to them. This training today is not going to cover how to complete a CRP in e-services, but if you already have an e-services account, it should be pretty intuitive on how to do that. You are going to keep a copy of all your 2025 CRPs until February 1st, 2029, which is 4 years. If a renter moves out before the end of the year, you can always give them their CRP when they move out, or again, the deadline is January 31st. If you don't have a forwarding address, you can send it to their last known address. If you do not give a CRP to your renters, we can assess a $100 penalty for each CRP not issued. You must issue a CRP for rent actually paid, even if the renter owes back rent. And then if you overstate the amount of rent constituting property tax, we can assess a $100 penalty or 50% of the overstatement, whichever is greater. Next.
Actually, got a couple questions. Another
Oh,
one
great.
from me, and then one from the audience here. The one from me is I just don't know, what does overstated rent mean?
If you're saying that you received more rent from the tenant, because again, if the more rent you pay, the higher the refund could go. I I don't know why you would do that or anything unless it's a friend of yours or something, but that's
I see. So it's if the landlord claims the tenant paid more than they actually paid, because then the tenant is getting more of a rebate. And so that's a penalty on the landlord, not the tenant.
yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the question from the audience is, if a renter receives 2 months of help from the county and we receive a check directly from the county, does this count as rent paid by the tenant?
I would go back and ask, what was there a certain program that the money came from? Because I'm going to talk a little bit about certain programs, like did it come from MFIT? Did it come from MSA? Like what was there a program that it came from? So
I
we can
think,
come back when we hear more from Wendy.
okay. Yeah, I think in this, yeah, if you could just say what program you're referring to, because there are a bunch of different ones. It could be, Section 8, it could be AMFIB, it could be emergency assistance
Hmm.
through a county or something like that.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
depending there could be different ways to handle it depending on where it came from.
Okay. Uh,
But hopefully I'll be able to answer that question in a little bit here. All right. So every year we get questions from property owners and managing agents about creating their CRPs. And those questions have led us to develop these 8 tips to help you avoid mistakes on your CRPs. And if you want to find more information, you can look on our website and just search CRP instructions webpage, and these will all be out there for you. So I will be getting into again some of those different programs here in a little bit with these tips. So hopefully that can help answer Wendy's question. But the 8 tips. So tip number 1, create 2 CRPs for married renters. So if you know that your renters are married, you're going to create a CRP for both individuals. And then tip number 2 is splitting rent payments between renters. So regardless of the marital status, you'll create a separate CRP for each adult occupant. Do not create CRPs for any dependent children under 18, so children that you're claiming on your tax return. Do not create a CRP for a transient renter, which is a short-term occupant who has a separate home. And also, you're not going to create one for any subletters. Rent paid differently depending on the agreement. So if there's multiple renters on a single agreement, then you're going to create a CRP for each renter, splitting rent evenly, even if only one renter is paying you. If there's multiple renters, each with their own lease agreement, who pays you directly, then you're going to create a CRP for each renter using the actual amount that they each paid.
yeah, so if I could just ask some clarifications, because we see this frequently. In the first case, you're talking about like two people rent an apartment unit in an apartment complex, and they are both signed on the lease, they're both paying. That's the one that should be split equally.
Yeah, so if there's like only one lease agreement and they're both on that lease agreement, then yes, in that case, you would split the rent evenly.
But in a case where you have like sober homes or like not quite dorms, but like that type of student housing, or like someone renting multiple rooms in their house, but every room or thing is leased specifically to one person, and that person has a lease with just their name on it. Even if there's 6 people living in the house, the landlord is issuing CRPs to each person based upon the rent that's in their lease.
Right, that is correct. And I'll just go back to something that you said here too. I heard you mention like student housing dormitories. Somebody in a dormitory isn't going to receive a certificate of rent paid because they're exempt from paying property taxes. So in that case, they would not get one.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All right. So tip number 3. Um, Trying to find my cursor here. All right. So tip number three, calculating rent accurately. So rent is going to include rental payments paid by the state or the county through programs like medical assistance, MA, Minnesota Family Investment Program, MFIP, Minnesota Supplemental Aid, MSA, housing support, or diversionary work program, DWP. Rent is going to include rent for a garage, a parking space, or a storage locker if provided as part of the rental package. And it's going to include amounts paid for utilities or pets if it's included as part of the rent and the taxpayer pays the same fixed monthly amount. However, rent does not include a damage deposit unless it was used to pay for rent. It does not include late charges or fines. Any rent paid after December 31st of that year. So if you're receiving back pay this month for 2025 rent, that would not be included. Utilities. So if a taxpayer pays the owner separately for utilities, even if they're included in one check with the rent, utilities are not included in your rent. And then it also does not include emergency assistance. And those are just a few examples of rent, of what rent does and does not cover. You can feel free to search the webpage for more information if you have questions.
Uh,
Tip number four
l-
is
Before we move on here, I think so. I think what that answered Wendy's question. I think you're saying that if it came from emergency assistance, then it's not going to be counted. Um, and then her follow-up question, which is 2 months past due for November and December, that's not going to be counted either uh, at this point, right?
yes, if those past 2 months, November and December, were not collected in 2025, they would not be included. You're just
And
going
then
to include any rent that you did collect during the year.
my follow-up question is if they are paid, November and December are paid now, which is not that uncommon, do those amounts get included in the 2026 CRP next year? Or are they lost forever into the void?
That's a good question. I want to take that one back, or if Michelle can answer, she can feel free to. I just don't want to give the wrong answer, so I'd rather look that one up.
Okay. Um, and then we have one more question in the chat related to this, which is, does it include monthly pet rent paid?
So pets, yes. So what I said for pet is it is included. If it's included as part of the rent that the taxpayer is paying, as long as it's a fixed monthly amount.
Which I can say from a landlord tenant perspective, like that's almost always going to be the case, especially now with the statute, Minnesota statute 504B.120, 120, that went into effect a year or so ago, where landlords are required to put those types of fees on the first page of the lease and call it total monthly payment. So any type of reoccurring fee like that is probably just going to be rent at this point. Next slide, I think.
All right. Tip number five. Okay, reporting medical assistance payments. So medical assistance is Minnesota's Medicaid program for people with low income. So you're going to enter the total amount of rent paid by medical assistance. So, for example, if $2,000 of rent was paid by medical assistance and $8,000 was paid by the renter, then you're going to enter $2,000 in the medical assistance amount field, and you'll enter $10,000 in the renter's share of rent paid. So include the medical assistance payments as part of the renter's share of rent paid. And then tip number 6 is entering the caretaker rent reduction. So if a renter paid a reduced rent in exchange for being a caretaker of the property, then you're going to enter the total yearly amount of the reduction in the caretaker rent reduction field. You'll split the caretaker rent reduction evenly between all adult occupants of that space and enter the reduced rent amount in the renter's share of rent paid. E-Services is going to automatically add those two together for the total rent paid field on the final copy of the CRP. Tip number 7. This is creating CRPs for mobile homes. So for mobile homes, ownership and occupancy are factors for who receives CRPs for this property type. There's going to be a table on our website that helps you determine how to issue CRPs for mobile homes. So if you just go out to our webpage and search 8 tips to avoid common CRP mistakes, you can find more information out there about that. And then creating CRPs for healthcare facilities. Healthcare facilities have special CRP requirements for residents. How a resident's care is paid for is going to be determined when a CRP needs to be issued. So again, there's going to be more information on our webpage. You can search Certificate of Rent Paid Instructions. And that's again for like any adult foster care, assisted living facility, nursing homes, or intermediate care facilities. Next. All right. So if you have any questions, we can obviously try and answer them here today, but outside of this presentation, you can feel free to contact the number or the email address that's listed here on the slide.
All right, and we have Michelle starting here in just a moment, but we do have a couple questions that I think are for you. So Wendy has just one more clarification question. So only calculate rent actually collected, which again, you're nodding yes for that. And then we have another question. What about spend downs? And I actually don't know what is meant by spend down. Do you, Jessica?
No, I was going to ask the same thing. I'm not sure what that means.
All right, well, if you could give us a little bit more information here on spend downs, I have a couple questions as well, so maybe we'll get that in. Can you just give me a ballpark, Jessica, of what a refund can be? I think that might be helpful for tenants if they've never done one of these before.
Oof. I know I mentioned earlier in the presentation the maximum refund amount is $2,640. So again, it just all depends on how much your income is and how much rent you paid. So 0 to 2640.
Yep. No, I mean, I think that's about right. Like when I was renting, I got, I mean, this was years ago, so it was also different then, but I got several hundred, but I knew people who got much more than that. And a lot of it depended upon the amount of rent and your income. And so it does range, but it can be a lot. And
Yeah.
so if
And
you,
go ahead.
I was just to say, if you should do it. If unless you know absolutely that you don't qualify because you make, 90, 100,000 or something like that, you're clearly above the bracket. It is very worth filing to get see what you get back.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that because it's on the individual income tax return, it does come with your income tax refund now, or it can help reduce that balance that you owe. So it's not a separate refund anymore. So, but we can always tell you how much it was too.
All right, and then we got another question, which is, I'm sorry if I missed this, but how is the renter's rebate affected with ongoing subsidies or housing vouchers? I think Section 8 vouchers where the tenant pays a portion or on the government HRA pays the rest is the what she's talking about there.
Yeah, so generally, if you're not the one paying out of pocket, the amount, generally what we're taking into consideration is how much rent you've paid out of pocket. And depending on which program, is assisting you, it may or may not be included. So that's all things that has to be taken into consideration.
Okay. Um, and I haven't received any clarification on what a spend down is yet, so maybe we'll still get that as we go.
Yep, I'm gonna stick
Uh,
around.
yep, and then yeah, that would be great because we'll probably have some more questions. But I think Michelle, we can turn it over to you now.
Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here and share information about United Community Action Partnership's VITA program. You can go to the next slide. So, just as a reminder, VITA does stand for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. Um, the IRS and MNDOR require that we use volunteers to provide this service. And as Jessica mentioned, we operate within a scope of returns that we can do. And, and if you go to the next slide, we have grown our volunteer base here at United Community Action. Oh, go back one, please. There we go. Um, so all of our volunteers are certified. They do IRS testing to be able to prepare tax returns. And we serve a rural area of Minnesota. So having a pool of 85 to 100 volunteers currently is about the most we've had over previous years. And they are really dedicated and put in a lot of hours. As you can see, last year was over 4,500 volunteer hours that they gave. They're pretty amazing. And the pictures on the screen are just from the appreciation suppers we did at the end of the year. Next slide. So you can see on this next slide, I mentioned we're a rural program. We're down in the southwest corner of Minnesota, and we do serve, our agency serves 9 counties. And with our tax program, we serve an additional 4. And so we have in-person tax clinics that are spread throughout our service area, and those are going to be the blue stars on the map. And then we also have intake only sites where folks can come in and meet with a tax site assistant and complete their paperwork and get copies of tax documents. And then the returns are brought to an in person site to be completed. We also, being in a rural area, recognize that transportation can be a barrier for low income taxpayers. And so we have a mobile site and we basically take our show on the road. We go out to low income apartment buildings or senior living buildings. We go out to smaller communities within our service area and kind of meet the taxpayers where they're at. Because if they're already struggling or have very low income, transportation costs for gas to travel a half hour, 40 minutes to a site to get your taxes done in person isn't always feasible. So we continue to offer our mobile site. I think we have 8 lined up already for the upcoming tax season.
And just, you obviously are rural, but the Vita tax program, like that's a thing that is all throughout Minnesota, right? There are other providers and people who do similar things.
That's correct. It's actually a nationwide program through the IRS.
Okay, so just I don't want people who are looking at this, living either in northern Minnesota or even Minneapolis to be like, oh, this isn't for me. You might not be for them, but there are other people that do basically the exact same thing that you do, other organizations as well, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. So the types of returns that we prepare at United Community Actions tax sites are federal and state returns. And then we also do the property tax and renter refunds as well. We will also do prior year returns back through 2020, and we do a large number of prior year returns every year. Our tax preparation services are available year round. As I mentioned earlier, we have some very dedicated volunteers who volunteer their services year round, and that allows us to provide the service all year. Next slide. So we do have income guidelines. Jessica mentioned income guidelines earlier. Our income guidelines are a little bit above the MNDOR guidelines. So we serve individuals with no dependents if they make 50,000 or less during the year. And for families or couples or self-employed folks, it's 75,000. that really is on the high end. The average adjusted gross income for the taxpayers that we serve throughout all of our clinics is right around 21,000. So we really are hitting those lower income, lower income households as well. We offer intake services out at Lower Sioux Indian Community, for example. And so we're able to serve a lot of folks that live there. We also are very blessed to have a number of bilingual or on multilingual staff. And so we're able to provide tax services in Karen, Somali, Spanish, Hmong, and Lao. We do have an agency language assistance plan too that allows us to serve other folks that may not speak the languages that we have available with our staff. And then you can go to the next slide. We offer multiple options for folks to get their taxes done. So I mentioned some of them already. I mentioned the in-person clinics where they will come in, they will sit down and meet with a tax preparer who will do an interview and then move on to a quality reviewer, and they will know the amount of their refund or what they owe before they leave for the evening. Then we have those intake options where they come in, we do the paperwork, and then we do the return without the taxpayer there, and that works better for some folks. Besides the couple of sites that were listed as intake sites, all of our in-person sites do have intake days as well. So the last option that we have is a virtual option. This became more popular during COVID. It's kind of tailed off a little bit, but we still offer it. And that is where we would get the tax documents, verify photo ID and taxpayer identification number with the taxpayer. And then we would sit just like we are today on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or something. And it's basically an in-person tax prep, but the person is connected virtually. So that is still an option through our sites as well. Next slide. And then appointments and scheduling. So January 12th was the first day that we opened up our appointment schedule. Taxpayers have a number of options to schedule their appointment. We do have a dedicated phone line, which is on the slide, that they can call to schedule an appointment. Folks can also go to our website, unitedcapmn.org, and schedule their own appointment on the website. And then we also have a bunch of postcards that we share with people or share that via email, and they can use a QR code and it takes them right to the scheduling website as well. And as mentioned earlier by Samuel, we do serve people outside of the area that was outlined on the map, as long as they meet, our guidelines and the returns are within scope, etc. But if you're in northern Minnesota, the Minnesota Department of Revenue website has a nice tool that you can go to the website and you can find the nearest tax preparation site to your location. Next slide. So when we file someone's tax return, again, we need to have their photo ID, their taxpayer identification number, all of their income documents, and all of their certificates of rent paid. We do see that a lot of the taxpayers that we serve through our sites are a highly mobile population, and so they could have multiple CRPs. We do ask that they gather all of their CRPs before we will electronically file their return to claim their renter's credit. If it is a hardship for them, then we can file it without all of them and file an amendment later. But that is not our preference. And Jessica also mentioned the rent paid affidavit if someone is unable to get a CRP from their landlord. And that is something that our UCAP tax team will help taxpayers do. So generally, if they don't have a CRP, we're providing some advocacy for the taxpayer to help them reach out to the landlord, because sometimes they're not sure what they're asking and can't explain it properly. So we are available to help taxpayers reach out to that landlord. We're able to explain to the landlord, why it's important that they provide this document. And if we've exhausted all of those options, then we will connect the taxpayer with a rent paid affidavit. And sometimes we help them complete it and gather their documentation for their rent payments as well, so that they are still able to claim any rent refund that they would be eligible for.
Yeah, if I could just jump in for a moment with a question here, because
Mhm.
this is one of the more common things we see, of course, on a legal hotline, because we're not helping people do their taxes, but people are calling us and they're saying, I can't get a CRP, I can't get a corrected CRP, the CRP is wrong, the landlord won't give me one or something like that. And so then you go file the rent paid affidavit with which Jessica talked about and you just talked about. And so you're saying you actually help people go through the steps to get the rent paid affidavit.
Thank
um,
you.
so if a tenant is calling us or listening to this, or they know someone and they can't get their certificate of rent paid, in addition to contacting the Minnesota Department of Revenue, one of the things, if they qualify at least, is to contact your organization or another Vita tax preparer to help get that information from their landlords.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if
Sure.
other sites, go those extra steps or not, but it's something that we have built into our program.
Yeah,
We
that's
want
really
to make
great.
things as easy as we can for renters to claim their credits. Okay, next slide. So, as Jessica talked about earlier as well, she talked about medical assistance, housing support, and then and how that gets reported on a CRP. What we see most often at our tax clinics is that landlords will put amounts of Section 8 payments that they receive directly from Section 8, for example, on the box B, the housing supports line. And so oftentimes we're talking with the taxpayers and we're finding out what kind of subsidy they had. And then, if necessary, getting the CRP corrected, because, like, Section 8, for example, would not be housing supports. Housing supports is a program for people with disabilities and older adults who have low income, and it helps them pay for housing and things that they need to stay housed, like in certain group settings or even out in the community. So our agency actually operates a housing support program, and things we provide are things like laundry facilities where they don't pay for the laundry and the laundry soap and the cleaning supplies. So that's very different than Section 8, because Section 8 doesn't provide those additional resources. So we want to make sure that it's reported correctly. And the other thing I will note is we see a lot of these in our southern service area, where someone is receiving, say, housing support, for example, or medical assistance payments, things like that. And if the amount on the CRP exceeds $99,999, that has to be or paper filed. We can't e-file anything over the 99,999. I request that each year from the Department of Revenue, but at this point that hasn't changed. So we will then paper file those returns for those folks.
And so I think perhaps you know the answer to the question from earlier, but what does a landlord put down for the portion paid by a Section 8 voucher? You said it doesn't go here. Does it go somewhere else or is it not counted?
Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe it is included on the CRP if someone's receiving Section 8. Only the portion of rent that the taxpayer themselves paid will go on the CRP form.
And this doesn't happen very often, but what happens if a friend or family or relative pays on behalf of a tenant? Does that get counted? I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. If you
No,
don't know, that's fine, but
it
yeah.
and again, Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong, but generally it's going to depend on how the money got to the landlord. So if a family member, let's just say a parent, helped a child pay their rent one month and the parent pays that rent directly to the landlord, that is not counted as paid by the taxpayer. But if the parent gives their child the money and the child then pays the landlord, then that would count as rent paid by the tenant.
Yeah, and that I think is helpful to know. I mean, for many tenants in this situation, the amount of money they get in the renter's rebate is maybe low on the list of priorities when they're behind on rent. But it sounds like if they have the ability and there's a third party, obviously not with emergency assistance, but with friends or family, getting the money directly to the tenant and then having the tenant pay is the easiest way to get the full CRP back.
Question. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, unless there were any other questions. Thanks for giving me the time to talk about our program and services we provide. And I did just want to mention one additional thing. Because our agency is a community action agency, if taxpayers come in and might be in crisis or look like they appear for eligible for SNAP benefits and may not be receiving them, we're also doing referrals to those other programs, both within our agency and outside of our agency, to make sure they're accessing services or programs that they could be eligible for. So that's just a ancillary service that we provide as well.
That's great. All right, well, I have maybe just a couple questions for you here while we see if any questions come in to the chat or the Q&A. Um, how often, or maybe not how often, but do you help people who have missed the tax filing deadline? So do you help people file CRPs or rent paid affidavits from prior years, like now 2024?
Yes, we will.
Okay. And so if someone comes in this year and say like May or June or July or August, you can help them, or at least again, it depends on other things, but it would be they could contact you and see if you could help them file an amended tax return for the CRP.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Um, and I think that was it for my questions for you specifically. We did get a follow-up on what spend down meant, which might go to you or to Jessica. But the spend downs that they were referring to are medical bill payments to the county before insurance kicks in. My question is, can the payment be tax deductible? And this is far enough outside of my area that I don't know, but if one of you two do know, that would be great.
Honestly, I do not know the answer to that without looking for information.
Yeah, I was just trying to look in my tech manuals and stuff and see if I could find anything, and I do not have an answer to that one right now either.
Okay. Well, and sometimes that's the way it is, which is, I mean, we said it's not tax advice, it's not legal advice either, obviously. But sometimes I think the way you find the answer to these questions is to go to a tax provider, prepare, and like bring your paperwork and actually ask them that question, I would say. Is that correct? All right.
Uh,
Just, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe bounce this off Jessica, but I don't know if that spend down, if someone itemized could be counted towards their, their medical bills on the Schedule A federally.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the way that would come into play, but I think it would be really good to, find the accurate answer for sure, and we can share that back with you, Samuel, and you could share it out.
Sure. Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. Um, let's see. We'll wait just one more question because I think we've got all of the questions answered at this point. Uh, we'll give another, say, 20 seconds or so just to see if anyone puts in a question. All right. And with that, I think that we've answered all the questions. I want to thank you both for giving a presentation here. Do you have anything else that you want to end with, or are we good?
I don't have anything else. Thanks for having me.
I think I'm good as well. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Thank you both again so much. This will conclude our webinar. It is recorded or has been recorded, and it will be live on our website. Again, thank you all so much. You have a great day.